Every valley shall be filled in, every mountain and hill made low, the crooked road shall become straight, the rough way smooth, and all people will see God's salvation. If that is the message of Advent and our preparation for the birth of Christ at Christmas, for his second coming once again, when all things will be made right and redeemed forever, well, then we are in the midst of Advent now with 2 candles lit, not quite in the middle, but pretty much there, having an opportunity to consider one of the central themes, moments, issues, people of Advent. That's right, a miraculous birth. An announcement by an angel. Amazing, improbable, impossible things happening, pointing to the very power of God through the life of this child. And I mean, of course, John the Baptist. We get into Advent, and you want to talk about a miraculous birth and the announcement of an angel, and you think Jesus, and I say, not yet. That's Christmas. Now, we'll get into the Annunciation in a little bit, but we have the tendency to skip over a little bit about John the Baptist because we don't tend to see as much of him in other times of the year. And that makes perfect sense because John the Baptist was never pointing at himself. He was always pointing to Christ. But especially in the season of Advent, it is worth stopping, backing up, and taking a moment to look square in the eye, face to face, the true central figure of Advent. The central figure of Advent is actually John. It is John who bridges the gap between Old Testament and New. It is John who forms the connective link between the law and the prophets and the gospel of Christ. It is John who is the one who is helping us to understand that this season of Advent, we are to prepare first for his birth and then for his return. It is because of John that we are hearing words of repentance, so that our preparation isn't just with the lights and the trees and the presents, but it's deep within our hearts. It's in the consequences of our daily lives. This is the work, this is the function, this is the ministry of John the Baptist to prepare the way of the Lord, and that's what Advent is, preparing the way of the Lord. So, if you have never known, or if it's been a while, let me tell you a little something about a miraculous birth and an angel announcement. You see, the Gospel of Luke, and Luke in essence is kind of a two-part book, right? We have our Gospel, and we also have the book of Acts. And written by the same guy, written for the same purpose. He starts off his gospel by saying, I wanted to make a full and complete account of what happened within this amazing, miraculous, redemptive life. People have said a lot of things about Jesus, but I wanted to kind of put it all together. I wanted to do the investigating so that as I present the story, it's as full and it's as complete and it's as accurate as possible. So, oh, excellent Theophilus, I give to you this researched, published story about the life of Jesus, John's Gospel, and about the beginning of the church, the book of Acts. So he gives us a little preface in the beginning of the Gospel about what the purpose is, and then what's the very first story about the life of Christ that Luke tells? It's about the birth of John the Baptist. There's an angel, and there's a miracle, but it's not Mary and Joseph. So Mary has a kinswoman, a cousin probably, Elizabeth, and Elizabeth is married to Zechariah, and Zechariah is a priest of the temple in Jerusalem. They are holy. They are devout. They are obedient. They love the Lord. And Zechariah is serving faithfully in the temple, and it just so happens that his turn comes up to be the person to light incense, which is supposed to happen early in the morning and late at night, and it's supposed to be kind of the start and the conclusion of temple worship. It's a very special job. It is a job mandated by the Old Testament. You have to do this. And so it was important and it was special. And it just so happened that Zechariah was chosen by lot. It was going to be your job right here and right now. And so all by himself, way early in the morning, Zechariah goes into the temple where it's just him in the presence of God. And he lights this incense to be a fragrant offering to the Lord to begin the day of sacrificial worship. And there's an angel. Gabriel is there. Now we think Gabriel, we think Mary. But before Mary ever meets Gabriel, Gabriel is there with Zechariah. Zechariah and Elizabeth, they have no children. It's not because Elizabeth is a virgin, it's because they never were able to have kids. And now they're too old. It's long past the time. They wanted children, they hoped for children, they tried for children, but it never worked out. And now that's something that's way in the past for them. And yet, there to do his duty in the temple, Zechariah meets Gabriel, and Gabriel says, God has favored the two of you. And your wife Elizabeth, who you thought could not conceive a child, well, your prayers have been heard. And she will become pregnant. And she will give birth to a son. And you will name this son John. And many people will rejoice because of him. He will be great. His life is going to be different. It's going to be set apart. But he will serve the purpose of bringing people back to the Lord. He will have the spirit and the power of Elijah the prophet. And he will turn the hearts of the parents to their children and the hearts of the children to their parents. He will make people prepared for the coming of the Lord. It's amazing. It's miraculous. And like basically every angel appearance, it has to start off with, don't freak out. And Zechariah, we're pretty familiar with how Mary responds. We don't tend to remember how Zechariah responds. Zechariah says, have you met my wife? We're very old. Are you sure it's us? And the angel Gabriel says, my name is Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God. Yes, I have met your wife. Yes, I know how old you are. God himself sent me to give you this good news. So I tell you what, why don't you just ponder it for a while all these things happen, because you're not going to be able to speak from here on out, Zech. So Zechariah, he comes out of his temple worship. He's the incense and this job and this duty that he was supposed to perform. Nothing. Can't say a word. And everyone else is trying to figure out what's going on. And he can't say anything. They don't understand him. So eventually they just have to send him home. And they send him home with Elizabeth. Pretty shortly thereafter, that old couple who was way past the hope of children, they conceive. It's miraculous. When you're that old, you don't get pregnant. It's not supposed to happen. Biologically, physically, chemically, hormonally. And yet, God supernaturally blesses this couple. And they conceive this miraculous child. All the things that Gabriel told Zechariah were going to happen, it happened. And all he can do is just go, learning his lesson. Thinking. When an angel who stands in the presence of God tells you something, just accept it. Smile and nod. Smile and nod. So Elizabeth is pregnant with the unborn John the Baptist, and we get in the middle now of Luke chapter 1, where Gabriel has a second job, this other lady, Mary, and she finds out she has a miraculous pregnancy too. Mary winds up visiting, and in that wonderful moment that we'll see a little bit later in Advent, where the pregnant Mary is in the home of the pregnant Elizabeth, and who was the very first person to recognize Christ? I mean, not me, because I don't have a baby in me. But it's the unborn John the Baptist who starts going nuts. And through this motion inspires Elizabeth with an utterance of the Holy Spirit, offers the words that some of you might know as the Hail Mary. So anyway, Mary goes on home. John the Baptist keeps growing. The time comes for the baby to be born. The baby's born. Little boy, hooray! 8th day, it's time for a circumcision and to be officially named. They don't ask Elizabeth, well, what's the baby's name? You're supposed to ask the father, as the patriarch of the household, I will name this child. And they go to ask Zechariah. He says, forget it. So they ask Elizabeth. I mean, this is not really protocol, but you're the only one who can talk. And Elizabeth, what's this kid's name? What are we going to call him? How about Zechariah Jr.? And she says, no, his name is John. And they say, no, really, what's his name? Because John, that's weird. You don't have anybody in the family named John. That's not how we do things. We give each other family names. We have very traditional names. You're supposed to kind of pass along again and again and again. She says, no, I'm telling you, his name is John. An angel told me. And they're like, yeah, okay, let's ask the guy who can't talk again. So they have to go back to Zechariah. Okay, she wants to call him John. But seriously, what are you going to name this child? And they give him something to write with. And this time he writes, his name is John. And he shows it to him. And at that moment, boom, his voice comes back. For he has now kind of gone full circle. The miracle that has been promised, the miracle that he didn't deny, but his skepticism was right out in the open, has now been fulfilled. And by his affirmation that he is completely on board with what the angel has said, he affirms the name of his child, so his name shall be. It is John, which means God is gracious. God is gracious. And with his first words that are now spoken, Zechariah, silent for all of these months, pondering about taking the words of an angel seriously and now seeing this miraculous birth and his son in front of him, says these words first. Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who has come to his people and set them free. He has raised up for us a mighty Savior, born in the house of the servant David. Through his holy prophets, he promised of old that he would save us from our enemies, from the hands of all who hate us. Familiar? You just read this. You just read this. It's from Luke chapter 1. We call it Canticle 16. Its other name is the Song of Zechariah, as he prophesies over his own son. This was the oath he swore to our father Abraham, to set us free from the hands of our enemies, free to worship him without fear, holy and righteous in his sight all the days of his life, holding his newborn son. And he says, you, my child, shall be called the prophet of the Most High, for you will go before the Lord to prepare his way, to give his people knowledge of salvation by the forgiveness of their sins, in the tender compassion of our God. And the dawn from on high shall break upon us, to shine on those who dwell in darkness and the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace. That's John the Baptist. We encounter him later. We tend to think about him more as an adult, as the guy who wore strange clothes and ate funny food, and who was sort of separated out from the rest of the world, and who preached repentance of sin, and baptized people in the Jordan. And all of those things are true, but that's not the whole story. You don't really understand fully who John is, I think, until you get this piece too. But John seems like kind of a hard case sometimes, right? Repent! And he seems, not mean-spirited, but the sort of guy who's like, he's so focused in that one-track mind, like maybe he was very fun at parties. Repent and return to the Lord. Except, maybe hear it slightly differently. Because his name doesn't mean hard case, jerk face, mean guy. His name means God is gracious. This message of repentance is graciousness. He's out there living a life solitary and separate away from everybody else for us. Not because he's a weirdo, but because God is so gracious. John is willing to give up the normal comforts of life and to fulfill this critical and essential, this prophesied and promised ministry to prepare the way so that as Jesus comes in his full and adult and public ministry, people are ready. The world is ready. The ground has been leveled. The rough places have been smoothed out. And all of the crooked roads will lead straight just to him. Because God is gracious. The prophetic message that you're going the wrong way is a message of graciousness and love. Someone who saves us from a terrible mistake we're about to make, we might consider that was a gracious act, and I'm thankful. Someone who catches us in the middle of a terrible mistake where we assume it's too far gone and there's nothing we can do but to see it down to its bitter end, who says, no, it's not too late, you can still turn around, it's going to be okay. We would call that a message of graciousness, and we would be grateful. And that is the message of John. For God is gracious and desires us to turn back. And as we do, what we face is not judgment. What we face is his love. You're wandering further away from that love. You're running off in the wrong direction. Turn around. Turn back. That is the literal definition of the word repentance, metanoia in the Greek. Turn around, turn back. You're going the wrong way. You're making a terrible mistake, but it's not too late. It will be okay. Turn around, turn back. Why? Because God is gracious. It's not just the message of John the Baptist. It's his whole life. It's who he is. And again, he bridges that gap between Old Testament and New. John the Baptist, considered by the church fathers to be the final and culminating prophet of the Old Testament. If you look at his message and you flip through the Old Testament prophets, they sound identical. Identical. Pick something almost random out of Jeremiah or Isaiah. It's going to sound exactly like John the Baptist. Pick something random out of, I don't know, Obadiah or Haggai. It's going to sound just like John the Baptist. And in this connection between Old Testament and New, there stands the central figure of Advent, through whose miraculous birth, whose favored life, whose life of sacrifice and love brings us closer and closer to the kingdom. When I say that John himself is the central figure of Advent, it's not to take a thing away from Christ, who is the center of all there is, seen and unseen, but it is to say, in this season of preparation for his birth and for his return, God himself has given us not just a reliable guide, not just someone who can help us be ready, but someone who is willing to lay down his own life to turn us back to the way we ought to go, because God himself is gracious. And the very life of John the Baptist will point to that again and again and again and again. And even the valleys will be lifted up. And even the mountains will be laid low. The rough ground will become smooth and level. And our crooked paths that seem to lead all over the place every single day, if we'll listen to John the Baptist, they will straighten right out. And this precious brief season of Advent will lead us right to Jesus. For that is who John is.